Good evening, one and all, and welcome. Today, I have a feast of fear for you all, with 20 stories that are sure to give you chills tonight. But without further ado, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I grew up on an island in Alaska and lived on the same property since birth to high school graduation. Our house had 2 stories, and the downstairs had a bathroom, furnace room, storage room, entryway, and rec room. One of the walls had some plywood pieces up, so that we could feed extension cords through it to our crawl space. We had a C-shaped driveway that you could enter from one side, and then park in the carport and then just drive towards the exit. The crawl space consisted of 2 big water tanks because we caught our own rainwater. We also used this area for storage. The space was 10 by 15, but only 3 feet high. You had to lift a cover up to get into the water tanks, and you could only enter the crawl space from the side of the house. It was a 2 by 2 door that we kept a master lock on but never actually locked. Our dog Brewster had an area to the side of the house as well. He had a big fenced area, his own stairway and porch, which was half covered, and he had a doghouse. During the summer, we had black bears in our yard most nights, and Brewster would give a quick bark to let them on their way. We knew his barks. There were 4 of us in the family: my parents, myself, and my older brother, who is 2 years older and has Down syndrome. My brother was in special education at school, and there were other kids who would come into the same room, but just once in a while throughout the day, because they had similar disabilities and were able to keep up some of their general classes. But some of the kids had discipline problems or mental illness. My brother was loved by the school kids, and everyone knew him. One day, a native kid that was about 15 came to our door and wanted to play with Travis. We thought it was odd, because Travis had moderate Downs, and he didn't really like playing with other kids. He liked watching kids play. Travis liked watching movies and listening to music. My mum asked the kid what his name was, and he said he was Mark, and he knew Travis from junior high the year prior, because he would go into Travis's class sometimes for help with his homework. I remember him staring at me a little too much, and he didn't seem like someone who was mentally challenged. My mother let him come in but kept a watchful eye on them. Travis seemed like he didn't want him there, and my mum told Mark that we were having dinner soon and told him it was time for him to go. My mum found out that he had moved into the area where we lived, but it was still a little away. He had been in and out of foster care for most of his life. His parents were abusive addicts. I think he came over another time and my mum felt bad for him, and she really felt as if something was off. She felt like he was coming over because of me. My mum politely told him that Travis didn't really like having visitors, and he seemed okay with that, and never came over again. My parents went to a church service on Wednesday evenings, and would be gone a couple of hours. I would stay home with Travis. At the time I was 11 and he was 13. I started helping out the church nursery when I was 9, and when I turned 11, my best friend and I took a babysitting course, which included CPR and first aid. We would babysit together, and at age 12 started babysitting on our own. My mum was a homemaker, and would always be home except for Wednesday's church service. My parents didn't drink, didn't do drugs nor smoke, and I can only remember my parents going out a few times when we were in need of a babysitter. I would leave the downstairs door unlocked for my parents when they were going to be gone only a couple of hours. I was expecting them home in half an hour, and was surprised when I heard the downstairs door open. I thought I must not have heard the car pull up, and Travis was up past his bedtime, so I quietly tell Travis to go to his bedroom and get to bed. I start walking through the kitchen to the top of the stairs, and I call out, "Mom? Dad?" And I hear the footsteps stop. And I'm looking down the stairs, and I can see men's work boots and jeans. This is not my parents. The way the stairs are set up, you could see the bottom half of someone without descending the stairs. I'm scared to death, and I run to Travis, who is going down the hall, and I grab him and drag him to my parents' bedroom, because it's the only room that locks and has a phone. Now, I don't mean this in a rude way, but down kids can be very stubborn, so my brother just wants to go to his room. But I get him to sit down on the bed, and I'm trying to keep him in the room whilst I'm grabbing a gun, and I call my neighbour. I can hear him walking around downstairs still. My neighbour answers her phone immediately, and I whisper to her that someone is in the house and that I'm scared. She told me to come out onto the front porch and she'll be there. I get the courage to run down the door, and I get outside. Thankfully she's in our driveway, and she has her hound dog with her. She lets me know that she's going to enter the house through the downstairs. She disappears from sight, but comes back quickly and tells me that the door is locked, so she makes her way upstairs. She gets to the top when we hear the downstairs door open and the crunching of gravel as the intruder runs off. She lets go of her dog, and the dog chases the person into the woods. The dog came back 10 minutes later, and our neighbour sat with us until my parents got home. The police were never called, because I think my parents assumed it was a neighbour's boy screwing with me. We live in a safe place, where the only thing you have to worry about are bears and an occasional wolf. A week after this incident, our dog would bark for 15 minutes after we went to bed consistently every night. We would look out the windows and saw nothing. We figured it was bears because it was springtime and Brewster's was probably just getting used to them again. A couple of months the barking still happened. I had my best friend stay the night, and we would always stay in the downstairs so that we can be louder and stay up as late as we'd like. Kate had a brother that was 7 years older, and we'd ask him to bring us booze. All the kids were starting their vices at our age. It was a little after midnight, and her brother never showed up, and Brewster never barked that night either. We were sitting on the stairs braiding each other's hair, when we both got a feeling as if someone were looking at us. We looked over, and there was a guy staring into the window. We ran upstairs in panic. We thought perhaps it was her brother, but he wouldn't have come to the window and spy on us. The face also seemed a bit darker than his, but we had the lights on downstairs, and there were no lights by that window outside, so it was hard to tell who it was. We didn't want to wake my parents up just in case it was her brother, so we waited 30 minutes and went back down to grab our stuff and went to sleep in my bedroom for the night. The next day we spoke to her brother, and he said it wasn't him. That night, Brewster's was back to barking again. 2 more months go by, and I had gone to bed and heard Brewster's bark, and I looked out my window and as usual didn't see anything. I had just dozed off again, and woke up to Brewster's barking frantically. I looked out my window, and I see a guy running out of our driveway. I thought about waking my parents, but we had a trail on the side of our house that kids used to use to run to the road behind ours. The neighborhood was on the side of a mountain, so all the kids used trails to get straight through to another road instead of using the main roads. I'd never seen someone come out of that part of the driveway because the trail was on the south side of the house, along with the crawl space and Brewster's area. My room was the only room on the north side. I decided to go back to sleep and was tossing and turning 15 minutes go by, and I smell smoke. I go to the hall and the smell is a lot stronger, and it's starting to get hazy in Travis's room, which was directly across from mine. I scream, "Fire! Fire! Wake up!" My parents are up, but Travis doesn't want to get out of bed. But thank God for the strength of adrenaline. We get outside and the flames were pouring out of the crawl space. We get Brewster out of his enclosure, and the neighbours all come out to help us. The firemen were there rather quickly, but the fire had destroyed the crawl space, and my parents' and Travis's rooms because they were directly over it. The firemen got the fire out, thankfully, and nobody was physically hurt. This was one of the scariest nights of my life, though. I always remember the fire chief kneeling down to speak to me after he'd spoken to my parents, and he said, "Hey Melinda, we believe it was arson." I looked at him with tears streaming down my face and I say in anger, "Who is arson?" Everyone started laughing so hard, and I'm thinking, how is it funny? That damn arson could have killed our family. So he explains what arson is. I'm still actually friends with the old fire chief's son, and I share that story with him often, because his father passed away from cancer when we were teens. His father is the only happy memory I have from that horrific night. The island I grew up on had a city and a village out south. We lived out south but before the village. We had firemen for the south, north and the city. We had state troopers for the island and the city cops in the city limits. My mum took my brother and I to our family friend's house, and my dad dealt with the fire officials and a state trooper showed up later. After the investigation, my family, neighbours and firemen pieced together that a person had been living in our crawl space for at least 4 months. We knew he set the house on fire on purpose. He used a box of matches. My mum said the first odd thing she noticed was that at night she smelled sulphur. We also knew who did it. It was Mark. His uncle was one of the first firemen who showed up at our house and saw him standing near our driveway watching. My mum had told him my description of what the person was wearing that I saw fleeing from our house, and it was what he was wearing. Behind our house near the crawl space area, my dad found out where he hung out when he wasn't at the crawl space. There was a bunch of cigarette butts, soda cans, which were all found near there. But because our crawl space wasn't locked, our insurance company wouldn't have paid for the repairs. Because of our water tanks, the space was supposed to be locked. So my parents never said anything to the police, and the firemen never said anything. By pursuing this, we could have not had a home, a house my father had built. It took 4 months for our house to be repaired, and it smelt like ozone even years later. What bothers me the most is knowing that he had seen me and my friends undressed numerous times whilst changing in the rec room during tons of sleepovers. Where he had set up shop was right next to the plywood with the holes drilled through. He listened to all our secrets. I never explained to my friends that he'd seen us and heard us during our sleepovers, because I didn't want them to feel sick to their stomachs like I did. I still have issues when it comes to being home alone. I can't sleep if I'm the only adult in the house. I keep the volume on everything very low, and I'm scared to shower. I like to be able to see the front door, and I have night terrors to this day. I'm 34 now, and I've been dealing with the anxiety since the fire and panic attacks since I was 18. Just recently, I was diagnosed with PTSD. When the intruder was in his early 20s, he was caught for burning down a house and was put in jail. All of my childhood toys were stored in the crawl space, along with a lot of our family's sentimental possessions. But ultimately, I lost a hell of a lot more than just some possessions that night. Me and my friends were talking about this girl's sleepover that we had when we went to school. It was all manner of messed up. I think we must have been between 11 or 12, and this girl was having a sleepover for her birthday. She was part of our group, and we were excited as well, as we'd never been to this particular friend's house. Her parents put an amazing amount of effort into the party. There was a buffet, barbecue, cake, and even a clown. We were kind of embarrassed about the clown, and we thought we were too old and it was just awkward. But it was nothing compared to the father's party games. First, find the 50 cents. He hid 50 cents around the house, and we had to go try and find it. Only he was chasing us and hooting at us and really screaming, like a hyperactive child. But the birthday girl seemed to be having a good time, so we pretended to be in the spirit of things. Then there was the wish game. He wanted us to sit on his knee and tell him a wish. Now, I'm really uncomfortable, and I can tell my friend is as well, but the birthday girl was on her dad's knee, telling him her wishes. Before we knew it, he's looking at my friend, patting his lap. At the time, I thought my friend put in a commendable effort not to look horrified, but looking back, there is no way in hell that he could have thought she would be comfortable sitting on his knee. She sits on his knee, mumbles her wish, and then it's my turn. Fool is me, because I thought I would get a pass being a boy, but no such luck. He's patting his knee, looking at me, so I sat up on his lap and told him a wish. Nothing overtly sinister happened, but the whole thing put me and my friends ill at ease. After that came the cellar game. That's what he called it, and I'm thinking, hell no, I'm not going into a cellar with this creepy old man, and I can tell my friend is almost panicking at the thought. But then the dad takes up a rug, and there's a trap door underneath it, leading to the cellar. And then I'm thinking, well, if that's not the coolest thing. So we go down to the cellar, and truth be told it was pretty cool at first. The dad had a candle that was the only light within the cellar after the door was closed. It was a small concrete room, and we sat on the floor whilst the dad told us creepy stories. I got the feeling these weren't age-appropriate stories and our parents wouldn't have been happy if they'd been there. And all that made the cellar even cooler. He's telling a story, about to get to the creepy reveal bit, and then he blows out the candle and we're plunged into absolute darkness. I'm laughing and shouting, as is the birthday girl, and my friend's really laughing. But she actually sounds panicked. We get out the cellar, and I'm saying how cool it was, but my friend looks really upset. Before bed, I manage to catch her alone, and ask her whether she's alright. She tells me that after the dad blew out the candle, he tickled her in the dark, and kind of put his head on her neck. She's really frightened, and makes me promise I'll stay awake with her in case the dad does something. My friend is asleep, and so is the birthday girl, and I'm really tired, but my friend made me a promise, and the truth is that I feel like a knight in shining armor. I must stay awake to protect my friend, and lo and behold, I can hear someone coming up the stairs. Slowly. They're trying not to make a noise, and then the door opens, and the dad sticks his head around the door. He stays like that for what seems like ages, at least 2 or 3 minutes just watching. He mustn't notice me because I'm making an effort to pretend not to be asleep. I'm just watching him watch her, my friend. Then he walks into the room over to my friend and just stands over her watching her. I'm completely freaked out, and despite feeling like a knight in shining armor, I now have no idea what to do, and I can feel pinprickles behind my eyes. I didn't even realize, but I was holding my breath until I let go, and then I make a noise. The dad then looks my way, and I remember his eyes going really wide, and then he sort of scurried really fast out the room. My heart was trip-hammering away, and I'm looking at my friend wanting to wake her up. I didn't though, and at some point I must have fallen asleep, because I woke up next morning. Years go by, and I lose touch with the birthday girl, but am still in touch with the friend who I made the promise to. Only recently did I tell her about the dad watching her in her sleep, and she was understandably unnerved. In order to tell this story, I have to go back many years before. My grandma bought a home in a Salt Lake City suburb in the 1960s, after her and my grandpa had their first child together. And she believes the home has been haunted since day one. She says that even though it was clear very early on that something was in their home, she never felt as if she needed to leave. She said it was her home, and that whoever was there was welcome to stay as long as they understood and appreciated the rules. Other than one story, it appears that all ghostly residents at Grandma's house followed her rules, and never gave her a reason to evict them. Over the years, my grandma welcomed more children to the home, and it became a safe haven for my entire family. The home is a one-story home with a downstairs living area. The upstairs has a living room, bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. The kitchen leads to a set of stairs leading to a basement with 3 or 4 rooms. We use the home for most family gatherings. Much of the family has experienced something unusual in the home, and it's commonly blamed on the ghosts. 2 of my grandma's stories are the reason that I have one of my own. My grandpa died in 1999. Several months after his death, my grandma was in her kitchen doing the dishes. She says she felt a strange feeling come over her, as if she needed to leave the house. She later attributed that feeling to that of my grandpa warning her of danger. Before she could even finish her thought, she had a sensation that something very strong was grabbing her from behind and trying to force her downstairs. She couldn't see anybody, but she felt something powerful trying to force her. She states that she fought the power very hard and managed to make it to her kitchen table. She sat at the table and held onto it, whilst the entity violently pulled and groped at her, but she would not let go. Finally, it just stopped, and nobody was there. The house was again silent and peaceful. She said that she was never so scared in her life. My grandma is a tough old lady, but you could tell that this really shook her deeply. Whilst telling me this story, at the same kitchen table, she told me of a little ghost girl that lives in her basement. She said the little girl would like to play pranks on people, pull the blankets off when they were sleeping, or hide things in the home. Grandma said she knew it was the girl because of the laughter. Grandma said the little girl would giggle mischievously, so she knew it was her. The little girl seemed peaceful, and she just wanted somebody to play with. One day my mum was doing laundry downstairs, while she was living there during her separation from my dad. She says she saw what appeared to be a hazy outline of a tiny person. She said hello with a nervous laugh, and then the haze just evaporated. To that point, I had never experienced anything scary or ghostly in the home. After hearing these stories, I was creeped out by being in any room alone, but still, it was nothing more than a spooky feeling and an embarrassing sprint up the stairs. Now, flash forward a few years to the exact kitchen table, only subtract my grandma and add my mother and 2 of my friends, Brad and Ashley. We were all sitting around talking and planning our evening. My friends and I had no money, so we settled on an evening at my grandma's house with my mum. Not exactly my idea of fun, but whatever. At one point we began telling ghost stories, and my mum and I decided to tell my friends about the house of horrors that they were currently sitting in. My mum told them about the little girl. She had an experience with the girl, so it made sense for her to tell it. The girl's story was met with enjoyment and disbelief. So when it was my turn to tell about my grandmother's incident with the dishes and the little girl, I was not surprised to see the same reaction in my friends' faces. The bullshit look. Next, almost as if on cue, the cheap yet expensive looking chandelier that hung above my grandma's table exploded. Now I'm not even talking about a blown bulb, I'm talking about 4 light bulbs actually exploding simultaneously. Glass went everywhere. After a few moments of looking around at each other, we all decided that we needed to get out. After tripping all over each other in an attempt to save ourselves, we all managed to make it outside. We all left the house within minutes. My mum went home and my friends and I went and got ourselves intoxicated as hell. The ghostly pyrotechnics were of course the talk of the evening. Even now I recall this as being absolutely the most spooked out I've ever been, as we discussed what happened with some other friends that we met up with that night. I began to notice that familiar bullshit look on their faces. Needless to say, Brad and Ashley believe the stories now. When I was a teenager, I had 2 really intense dreams one night. The first one was about an online friend of mine calling me to say that she'd broken up with her boyfriend, and I sang a few lines of "Seals Don't Cry" over the phone. The second dream was finding a real-life friend's dead body floating in her bathtub. I didn't think anything of it until I logged online that evening, and the online friend came online to tell me that she'd broken up with her boyfriend that day. I immediately asked her if I could call her, and she said no. I remember thinking that if it meant something, it meant I could change it. Not long after, my phone rang, and it was my real-life friend from the dream calling me. I was completely freaked at this point, but I spoke to her as normal. She was just chatting to me about school and shit, until I realized I heard a splash in the background. I asked her, "Are you in the tub?" And when she said yes, I felt like my heart had stopped. I asked her, "What did you do?" She didn't answer me straight away, and then after a very long pause, she told me that she'd taken an entire bottle of pills and chased it with some mushrooms and vodka. She'd become scared waiting for it to hit her, so she called me so that she could hear someone's voice. I hung up and called 911. By the time they got there, she was unconscious but alive. Today, she's a mum to a beautiful little girl, and she's okay. Suicide is a horrific thing, and my deepest sympathies for anyone who's had the misfortune of being touched by it. My brother moved in with me a few months ago and got a job doing night shift custodial work at a nearby high school. His workday started at 10 PM, and fortunately for him, it's close enough to walk. One night, a little after midnight, he calls me in a panic asking me to come down and pick him up, because there's some kind of weird shit happening, and there's no way that he's sticking around by himself. My brother isn't the sort of person to freak out over nothing, so I hop in my car in my pajamas and head down to the high school. A little background is needed here. As children, my brother was apparently sensitive. He often talked about various seemingly supernatural encounters. In one very old house that we lived in, he told our parents that a man would come to his room at night and tell him bedtime stories. It wasn't until we were fully grown that our father told us that a distant relative had committed suicide in the same room that was my brother's room, years before either of us were born, and that my brother's description of the man matched the deceased relatives exactly. I, however, am the exact opposite. Nothing creepy or supernatural ever happens to me or around me. If it happened there before, it doesn't happen when I'm there, and it doesn't return after I've left. I've had enough perplexed people tell me that their ghost went away after a visit from me, or that a particular place stopped being creepy after I was there, or had someone acting crazy calm down when I spoke to them. So I'm quite confident that I'm a natural repellent for creepy stuff. So I get to the high school, and my brother is out standing at the front doors. He runs over to the car and tells me that I have to make it stop. It was the sound of lockers opening and closing just out of sight. He would turn a corner of a hallway and hear a locker open and slam closed behind him, or around the corner of the next hallway. We got to the school, and we walk up and down the halls. Nothing happens. No sound, no movement, no locker doors opening nor closing. No cold spots, and no inexplicable drafts. No creepy noises nor feelings. We walk down to the last hallway, at which point I'm getting on for 1 AM. I'm tired and I just want to go back home. There's one locker standing ajar. As we approach it, my brother reaches out to close it, but then he pulls his hand back and says, "Can you do it?" I close the locker. Nothing happens. Finally, my brother says that I can go, as long as I promise to come back the next night if there are any more problems. A week later, he comes home and hands me a thank you note and a $50 Amazon gift card from the head of the custodial department for services rendered. Apparently, they'd been having a ghost problem for quite some time, and since I made a guest appearance, it was no more. Easiest $50 I've ever made. This happened to me when I was 6 or 7 years old. I remember this very clearly to this day, and it still makes my spine shiver thinking about it. I had the large bedroom in my flat. My mum had decorated the walls with pink and lavender paint and cute little metallic swirls. I had bunk beds, glittery curtains in my window, charms, and glittery things hanging from the ceiling. A young girl's dream. I'll try to explain a rough layout of my room. The door opens, and you will immediately see my purple bunk beds, with my head facing out the door. On the wall in front of you, behind my bunk beds, is a long window. To the left on the wall looking out to my garden. The next wall to my left of the bunk beds has a large fireplace, which I used to put all my trinkets on, and then the joining wall to my door was more of an alcove. Anyway, that is where I saw her. I remember getting into bed at night, and everything seemed normal at first. My room wasn't usually too dark, because the moonlight shone through my window and through my glittery curtains. After trying to sleep for what seemed like ages, I don't know why, but I started to look around my room, particularly in the alcove area. Something was in the dark corner. I couldn't focus my eyes properly for a while, but when I did, I noticed my girl's world head, one of those plastic weird lady heads that you can do makeup on and style her hair, stood out in the moonlight against the creepy dark corner. I remember going to lay back down on my bed, but I had an urge to look back, and when I did I was paralyzed with fear. At first I thought I might be imagining it, because I had been staring at the plastic lady head, but I swear I saw this dark woman-like outline stood right there next to the plastic head. It was like a dark grey black mist, but in the shape of a woman. I slowly looked at her, or it, with its massive bulging eyes, scanning down, and saw that she had no feet. There was nothing there. No shadow, no feet, nothing. She, or it, was levitating about 10 inches off the ground, and it seemed like she was moving towards me. I was absolutely terrified, and will always remember this because of how cripplingly scary it was. I was in shock. I quickly spun around in bed and curled into the fetal position, with my quilt tightly wrapped around me. I made sure the quilt was tightly wrapped around my neck and head. And can I just add that there were no labels or anything that could have emulated what happened next. I was shaking and trying not to breathe loudly when I felt something standing behind me, leaning over me. I closed my eyes and gripped the quilt, and all of a sudden, I felt a tickle on the back of my neck. It's the feeling you get when someone puts their fingers on the back of your neck. It started off like that, and then became quickly more aggressive, tightening around the back of my neck, as if someone were trying to keep hold of me. I tried to scream, but no words came out. I was sweating and shaking, and my neck was getting worse. It was hurting. I tried screaming over and over, but all that came out were the little squeaks. It was as if I were gasping for air. I remember the moment when I was finally able to scream for my mum. I screamed at the top of my lungs, but it came out as a cracked, blood-curdling cry for help. But as soon as she ran in and flung the door open, a burst of light came through and the whole thing stopped. My mum grabbed me out of bed and carried me to the front room, cradling me as I sobbed hysterically. To this day, she still believes me in what I said, even though she's never had a personal paranormal experience. There was no way I lied about what I saw. From then on, I slept with my mum for a while, and we eventually moved out. I'm grateful that we haven't been back since. When I was a younger woman, I moved, all alone, to Atlanta for an internship. I was dirt poor, so I took public transit everywhere I went. I encountered plenty of creeps on the train, but was always able to get them to back off or sneakily escape into the crowd. On my last day, I took the train to the airport. A very large man approached me in a familiar style. He was both much taller and broader than I, casually dressed, maybe even cheaply. I followed my usual protocols, not smiling and not saying anything, holding on tight to all possessions, and being ready to bolt if necessary. I don't think he asked for me to do anything. His interests weren't explicitly sexual or flirtatious. He just talked to me intermittently, with cool confidence, of someone who thinks you're not going anywhere. I wasn't too worried, but I didn't have the usual luxury of sneaking away and catching the next train. I had to be at the airport. I got off the train. He got off the train. There was no subterfuge about this. No, oh, I'm going to the airport too. At this point, he was deliberately, explicitly walking with me. Still not flirting. Still not asking for anything. Not my number, not anything. He got on the escalators with me. He closed his hands over mine on my rolling suitcase handle, and I kept my grip tight on the handle, thinking, what the hell? Is he going to try and steal it? I should have yanked it away from him, but I was so surprised and scared by the weird, inexplicable move in the now familiar game of cat and mouse that I didn't react at all. I just held on tight, hoping, praying that I was strong enough to keep my own. There were enough people around it that I could make a scene if I wanted to. Looking back, not reacting to this was really stupid. But I was young and completely out of sorts. It would have been easy under the circumstances to say, "Hey, get your dirty hands off my suitcase." but I wasn't raised to be reactive or combative like that. This wasn't part of my instinct repertoire. He started looking around as if he were trying to formulate a plan, and at this point I was afraid. I don't exactly remember what happened next. It's like he just changed his mind and walked away. I made my flight to Atlanta and left. But what the hell was on his mind going through the whole encounter? Why follow someone so far for no reason? Why make that specific grab? What the hell was that? It wasn't the only time I've had a stranger act as if they know me, but this guy didn't seem deranged or even slightly off. It was the weirdest thing. This is Lisa. She is my friend. My mum and dad can't see her, so they say she is an imaginary friend. Lisa is a nice friend. Today I tried to plant a flower in the yard. I tried to plant it by the sandbox, but Lisa said that's where her daddy was sleeping, so I planted it in a cup of dirt. Lisa is at school with me today. I bought her for show and tell, but Miss Monroe got angry because she can't see Lisa. Lisa got sad, so she hid in the chalkboard eraser. Yesterday was my birthday party. Mum bought pizza, but no one came. Lisa said people came to the porch and then left, but they left presents. I got 3 Barbies and some shoes and $5. Me and Lisa played Barbies. Miss Monroe is absent today. Our substitute is named Mrs. Digman. She's pretty and nice, and is letting us have snack time after dairy time. I wish Mrs. Digman could stay our teacher. Yesterday, Lisa and I went on a long walk until the moon came out. Daddy got really mad and said Lisa is stupid and fake. Lisa got sad and disappeared. Today she didn't come to school, but Mrs. Digman said that Mrs. Monroe won't come back. Daddy was at work all day today. He didn't even come home to eat dinner. Today, he is still at work. Mum packed me a pudding in my lunch today. Pudding is my favourite. I miss Lisa. Daddy is really busy at work. He didn't come home at the weekend. Mum is angry at him. I'm going to write a letter for Lisa. Dear Lisa, I miss you. Please come back. I'm sorry when my dad was mean. You're my best friend. Lisa came back yesterday. She said sorry for leaving, and I told her my dad won't come home. Lisa said Mrs. Monroe and him are sleeping like her dad. I hope they wake up soon. In the year 2010 or 2011, I was beginning to explore YouTube. I watched cat videos and music videos most of the time. But one day, I found an incredible singer. She was doing cover songs and had an amazing voice, and I really liked her cool punk style. I liked her but didn't have a YouTube account, so I couldn't subscribe to her, and that's why I lost her again, after a couple of days. Jump to the year 2015, where I found my all-time favourite YouTuber, Ryan Higger. I love this guy and his content so much. I can't even begin to tell you. I got addicted to him, and I followed him on every social media platform possible. So this brings us to the year 2016. I was graduating in that summer, and I was studying non-stop. One day in June, I think it was Friday the 10th, I was studying for a really long time. It was around 12:30 or 1 when I finally said, okay, that's it, I want to stop now. But I was awake too much, so I had to distract myself in order to get tired enough to go back to sleep. So I watched some YouTube videos and looked at the clock again. It was around 4 AM. Then I thought I was tired enough now to go to sleep. But suddenly a thought came through my mind. I wonder what that YouTuber's doing who I watched back in the day. Is she still singing? What is she doing? And most importantly of all, what was her name? But I couldn't remember her name. I hadn't thought about her in years, so it wasn't a surprise that I couldn't remember her name. But I didn't want to try and look her up that night because I knew that I wouldn't be able to find her immediately. And I was tired and was pretty much done for the internet for now. The next morning I woke up and started scrolling through my Twitter notifications. I noticed that Ryan Higger had tweeted something. Oh cool, I thought. Let's see what he says so I can give it a like. And when I saw it, I saw hashtag prayers for Christina. I didn't know what to think of that. I was confused as I didn't know what was going on, and as I kept scrolling down my feed there was another one. Please tell me that hashtag RIP Christina Grimmie is just a messed up rumour. My whole body froze. I was staring at my phone in disbelief, shock and terror. I knew the face that I was going to see when I googled that name. I couldn't stop my fingers from moving off my phone because I was too scared. I knew the name. I remembered it again. After a minute of staring onto my phone without really looking at it, I googled the name of the girl, and yes, it was her. It was the YouTuber I thought of the night before. She had been shot right after a concert and died. That alone was sad enough because she was such a talented artist. And I'm 100% sure she would have had an amazing career if that incident hadn't have happened. But the fact that I hadn't thought about her in over 6 years, not hearing a single thing about her here in Austria, and then thinking about her on the night of her death? That's too crazy for me. And it still is. I mean, how can it be possible? A couple of weeks later, I thought about the experience and wondered, when did she die exactly? I mean, what time? So I looked it up and searched for the time difference between Orlando, where she died, and Austria, and the time of her death. Once I had that, I counted back the hours of the time difference and got shocked again. She got shot at almost exactly the same time I'd thought about her. Perhaps this is just a coincidence, but they do say that some people, like mediums, can tap into a special and different kind of energy that lets them in on a wealth of information. I'm not really sure what I believe, but I know for sure this is one of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me. Rest in peace, Christina. My mother was dating this guy who owned a houseboat with this man a few years ago. One of the guy's nephews, called Scott from Nova Scotia, decides to move up and work with his uncle and rent the houseboat that he and my mum owned. Anyway, he moves up in December, so when Christmas rolls around and we're all hanging out at my family's Christmas party, we're still just getting to know Scott. Somehow the conversation rolls around to cults, and he immediately pipes up, "Oh man, don't even talk to me about cults," to which my brother jokingly replies, "What, were you raised by the children of God or something?" Scott's jaw drops to the floor, and he shouts, "How did you know?" It was a completely random guess, just the first cult name that came to my brother's mind. He didn't really tell us much about his experiences in the cult, but we later found out through unpleasant experiences that he was deeply psychologically troubled. He checked himself into the hospital after numerous suicide attempts, got kicked out of both jobs and the house because he never showed up and never paid rent. The whole story ends pretty damn tragically when he disappeared one day on his way to work for the power station. He was missing for months, and we'd all thought that he'd run away or killed himself. Finally, some hiker found his bones scattered in the woods around where he'd been living. The exact cause of death is still unknown. I am a 25-year-old woman living in Canada, and my 12-year-old half-brother Jake lives in Texas with my father. Long story short, my dad had a child with another woman. Unfortunately, he is an extremely immature parent. He tries to control Jake's contact by limiting between me and my other siblings. Won't go into too much detail, but luckily, we've both found ways to keep in touch. So I'm just chilling, browsing on my phone, and I get a message from Jake on Hangouts. I didn't really want to talk to him at the moment, because he was being rude earlier, but then he tells me that he's scared. Jake isn't very easily scared. He's kind of an intense and mischievous kid, so when he told me that, I was concerned, and asked him what's up. He tells me there is someone that's been knocking on the door for a while. Mind you, it's 10:30 PM on a Monday night. Then I ask him where our dad is, and he said that he pissed off to a bar down the road. I ask him for more details, and he said the guy's pounding on the door and yelling who's in there. I tell him to stay away from the door. He needs to get to a phone and call the police ASAP. He then tells me that they don't even have a landline, and he doesn't have a cell. Cool. I guess my dad has Hangouts too though, because Jake was able to reach him and my dad apparently called the police from the bar, and he said he'd be there shortly. I told Jake I'd stay with him over Hangouts until someone arrived, and he said he was still scared because this dark figure was walking around the front door and pounding on it. He even said that someone drove by and the guy stopped, but continued after whoever drove by. This sent shivers down my spine, as this person knew what they were doing and probably had sinister intentions. I continued to talk to him. My uncle, who lives down the street from them, did come over, and the cops eventually did too. Jake says once my uncle pulled up, the knocking ceased entirely, but my dad was still not present by the time they all arrived. There wasn't much I could do besides read how scared he was, and this made me all the more angry with my father for leaving a 12-year-old home alone at this hour with a sick guy who clearly must have known someone was home. Nothing ever came of it and he was never found, but whoever this twisted guy was, let's never meet again, for your sake. Me and my friend were at a Chinese restaurant. We ordered a General Tso chicken dinner and a shrimp lo mein dish. When we sat down, we took out both our boxes and set them on the table about 2 feet apart. My friend opens the first box, and we see a shrimp lo mein dish. It has all the things in there: noodles, shrimp, fried rice. He closes the box and opens the other box. Inside that box is another shrimp lo mein dish. Oh, I think they must have gotten our order mixed up. I was just about to say this when my friend out loud says, "Looks like they made a mistake and have given us 2. As he opens up the first box again, inside of it is a General Tso chicken dinner order. General Tso chicken, white rice, and an egg roll. He froze and looked at me. I looked back at him, and we sat in silence. It took us about 5 minutes or so to collect ourselves, and I have absolutely no idea what the hell happened. I have a 3-year-old who says some pretty strange stuff. Last night, "Mummy, the man, the very big man with the big yellow eyes is looking at you." I look. Nothing. I tell him there's no man and that he's make-believe. My son laughs. "Oh, he's hiding now." 2 minutes later, "Oh no, Mummy, you made him very mad. Now he says he'll come at you when you're sleeping." A few weeks ago he tells me, "I'm not going to be 4, I'm going to die, and you will put me down, down, down in the hole." I tell him that that isn't true, and ask him who told him that. He gets really quiet and goes, "The man told me, but I will be scared. So after 3 nights, you will die too and come with me." Sheesh, as if I didn't have bad enough dreams already. I worked overnights changing grocery store prices. We were all convinced the place was haunted. Those big heavy swinging doors to the back would literally open all the way, and no one was there. Cans and other products would fly off the shelves, like Scoot, and then go all the way to the other side of the aisle before hitting the ground. My second day, I was working in the freezer ice cream section, and heard a triple knock from the back. I decided to answer back. I knocked twice, and the knocking continued for a while, and followed me down to the doors. I found out later that there was no access back there. It was a solid wall. I found that pretty freaky. The one time that made me jumpy as hell, I was alone and had to catch a frog that had gotten inside the store. It went underneath a shelf, so I got on my hands and knees and decided to try and grab him without looking, because I saw him just go under the shelf, and there were very few spaces that he could occupy in that very small space. I was feeling around for it, and something grabbed my hand. I screamed as loud as I could, sprang backwards on my butt, knocked stuff off the shelf behind me, and ran out of the door. One of the managers ran after me and asked what happened. I told her, and she replies, "Oh, yeah, that happens here sometimes. Nobody's been hurt though. I've had a few other incidences here and there, but none were as terrifying as that day." When I was 7 years old, I was walking to my babysitter's house all by myself. She only lived a block from the schoolyard, and I'd done it 100 times. The car pulls up beside me on the road, and the driver keeps gesturing for me to come closer and shouting, "Come here, hey, come here kid." I'm frozen on the sidewalk, and shaking my head saying no, while my knuckles turn white clinging to my backpack. All he says before driving off is, "Stay away from Christina," and then I never saw him again. Christina was one of my on and off again friends in grade school, along with another girl who alternated between hating me and being buddy-buddy. I had completely forgotten about it after a while, and went on being on and off again friends with both of them. In 5th grade, the other girl invited me to the pop machine in the back of the hall for lunch. Cool, okay. Quality time with a girl I've known since I was a baby. Sure. We get back to the classroom, and Christina tells me that people were playing with my lunch and hid stuff, but she was nice enough to bring it all back for me. I started drinking the pop I'd bought for lunch, and something was really off. I spit it out and ran for the water fountain to rinse my mouth. Turns out Christina and her sister had topped up my drink with Lysol. If I drank any more, I would have probably been stupid sick. The police were called, and a restraining order was put on both of them. It was delightfully ineffective, however, because the school was so small, there was no separate class to put them in. They got 3 and 4 day suspensions. I have no idea if the two events are related, who that man was, or how he knew how bad Christina was at the time, but that memory sticks with me to this day. I saw a shadow person once. I didn't know that's what they were called until much later. I was living in a house in Laguna Beach that had been there since the 1920s. In its history, there had been a speakeasy, a brothel, and a house for smuggling illegal immigrants. One day, my new wife and I were having an argument. I can't even recall what it was about. She walked down the block to get a cup of coffee and cool off, and I was alone in the house. The way the place was built was incredibly haphazard. There was a bedroom and a living room on one side, then a bathroom with 2 entrances on the other side. From my bedroom, I could see across the hall into the bathroom, then through the bathroom and look down the other hall. I was standing at my dresser, and I just noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. I looked down there, and there it was. Honest to God, this gives me goosebumps just remembering it 17 years later. It was a black figure. It was about 3 feet tall, and it was only vaguely humanoid. It looked like black scribbles, as if someone had scribbled a human shape, but the scribbles moved, like electricity arcing. That's the best way I can describe it. There was no sound that I could remember. I distinctly remember that when I saw it, I wasn't afraid. I was just confused. Then it noticed me looking at it. I can't say it turned around. It just focused on me, I suppose. And then I was scared. I didn't move, I didn't scream, nothing. I was just frozen. Because at that moment it came at me. It rushed down the hallway towards me. I have no idea what it intended, but as soon as it entered the bathroom, the door closed and just slammed shut by itself. I screamed. I yelled for my wife, but she wasn't home. I went outside into the daylight and didn't go back in until she got home about 10 minutes later. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe I saw something supernatural, but I know I saw something. I just don't know what that something was. I paid a visit to a local nightclub called the Happy Red Onion, taking part in the Wednesday social club party. The restaurant is divided in 2 parts, the bar and the disco. At one point, I went to the disco side of the restaurant. I ordered just a huge pint of ice water, and then a random guy approached me, asking me if I could buy him a pint of beer. With all the politeness imaginable, I told him that unfortunately it wouldn't be possible. In all honesty, I don't see why I should buy a random guy a beer at all. And would you guess what happened next? The man started spontaneously accusing me of harassing women and underage girls trying to get attention. He then suggested that everyone present at the restaurant would have known it too. However, he claimed that if I'd bought him a beer, he would have just left me alone. He even invited me to join him and some friends on their table. I didn't understand. His behaviour enlarged into such measures that I had to turn to the bartender in order to get some help. Only rarely in my life had I felt so threatened, and such fear from such an individual. The bartender instructed me to go to one of the sides of the bar, and the bully to go to the other. I don't understand how he could be accusing me of harassing underage girls, since they couldn't even get into any nightclubs here in Finland. After that, I sat down on my table on my side of the bar. The guy still approached me, asking me why I was there. He then began accusing me of being a predator to young girls. The bartender noticed, came along, and in a loud voice ordered the guy to go outside, or he would be evicted. From that moment onwards, the evening was fine, but apparently 15 minutes before closing, there was a fight between some people outside. I'm unsure if he was involved, maybe he just wanted a brawl, but either way, that physical confrontation was unpleasant, and I'm still a little bit in shock. I work the night shift in a psych facility. Basically, I've seen a lot of things working at night, from people coming in high and psychotic, to people huddling naked in the corner of a room whispering. The scariest thing I've ever seen was a patient coming out to the nurse's station and saying that someone was outside of their window looking in. From their admission, they had been experiencing pretty strong hallucinations, so we assumed this was another one. To provide some ease, we went into the room to verify, that there was no one there, and provide some relief and comfort. We have removable drawer curtains in the room, and they were shut. We walked up to it and asked if this was the window. The patient told us that it was. We drew open the curtain, and I quite possibly had the biggest scare of my life. There was somebody there, wide-eyed and staring right back at us through the window. He ran off when he saw me, and we ended up calling the police as well as security. They never found the guy, and we never saw him again. The thing I don't understand is, why would someone just be staring into the room of a psychiatric patient, let alone when the curtains were closed? Still creeps me out to this day. I received a call from an elderly lady who had trouble breathing. I had taken several calls from her and her husband in the past, so I recognized her voice. I dispatched an ambulance to her residence and held her on the line, trying to keep her calm whilst the ambulances were responding. Ambulance advised that they were 15 minutes away, and she lived in a very rural area. I'm talking to her, asking about how her husband is and how he's doing, just making small talk with her. The ambulance calls in and advises that they are on the scene, and I let them know that she is in severe respiratory distress, and I still had her on the line. I let her know the ambulances are coming to the door, to go answer and open the door, and she says okay and hangs up the phone. Pretty normal, right? Well, here is where things get weird. The EMT and paramedic on scene calls back about a minute later and advises that no one is answering the door. We have a sheriff unit who was in the area, pulling on scene about that time. The sheriff unit confirmed the address and advised he was breaching the door to make access to the patient. 5 minutes go by and the paramedic on scene radios in asking who the caller was. I advise it was the elderly female who lived at the residence. He tells me that he's going to call in and needs to speak to the supervisor on shift. We get him over to the supervisor, and the supervisor confirms the information that I gave him and asks what's going on. Apparently, the elderly female had been dead for a while and was already in full rigor mortis. They thought I was wrong on the caller, but the other dispatcher played it back and confirmed it was the female who called. The ambulance transferred the hospital, and we got the same cause and disbelief from the doctors. My grandfather passed away a few weeks after I was born. Never met the guy, never knew what he looked like. When I was 5 years old, I started to see this man in our rocking chair. I called him the rocking chair man, and my parents thought it was just an imaginary friend, but it started to bug them when I told them every single day. They finally questioned me about it. I told them every detail I could remember, and finally, they showed me a picture of a man. It was my grandfather. I am 22, and every time I dream, he's in the background somewhere. I remember when I dreamt about my high school graduation, and I looked in the stands and I saw him with my parents. I like to think that he's just there watching out for me, and being there when he's not really. So, I'm truly a believer of the paranormal. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I'm not sure if my last 2 videos have actually hit your sub box, or if you've been notified at all, or this one as well, to be honest. The views are unusually low, or maybe you guys just don't like police or middle of nowhere stories anymore, which is strange as it's a topic I thought most of you guys really enjoyed. If anyone could shed some light on the situation, it would be greatly appreciated. And of course, if there is a problem with your sub boxes, I think if you press the little bell thingy next to my name, you get notified more often. So if you want to do that, feel free. Just a reminder that I have launched my merch store, so if you'd like a unique and limited edition piece of Mortis Media merchandise, get your hands on a t-shirt quickly, as stocks won't last forever. Remember that if you enjoyed today's video, please consider dropping a like and leaving a comment. It's a really great way to help support the channel and I really appreciate it. And if you'd like to do something incredible to help support the channel even further, feel free to visit my Patreon page. You can find a link to it in the description, as well as the links to my social media, which you should definitely follow me on. And if you'd like your story read on my channel, you can submit it as a text post to my Reddit page or send it to me via email. Both links can of course be found in the description. But anyway, for now guys, I'm gonna sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.